So you came out with something called the top 10 essential habits for personal growth and how to create exponential success in business and life. And it's really interesting the 10 that are here. And what I love about them is you give like practical ways for you to actually practice these things. The first one being mindfulness, for example. Great. You hear that word all the time. It's like a buzzword, mindfulness. Like a lot of these personal development words are
Yeah.
so they're buzzwords, they're sexy and whatnot, but there's not
What does it really
really a lot of
mean?
information. Right, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and how do you actually apply that to your daily life to actually see growth and see, yourself and your quality of life, the quality of work that you do amplify rather than just paying for another course or reading that
Yeah.
next book or another
Yeah.
podcast. So, how did you come up with these 10 and is there a reason why you placed them in this specific order?
Yeah. Another great question. Thank you for asking that. And, when I went through doing this work in my own breakdown that led to this breakthrough in why isn't what I'm doing in personal development working? What I realized, I've wrote a book about this framework and model of learning to shut up and sit and go within. You know this, your listeners may or may not, but from my bio, they can go read it. My first background and first career that I worked in was in the health and wellness industry as a trainer, health coach, life coach. And so the idea of my first career was built on behavior change. And so I could change anybody's behavior. That was not the issue. I know so deep the intricacies of how the human behavioral patterns and habits and all this stuff works. And so when I went in to my own breakdown, I was in my second career, is what I call it, where I was in entrepreneurship, leadership development. I was doing a lot of coaching and consulting and turning thoughts into things, is what I would tell people. And so in that space, there was all these, fancy words and I think this is where I realized in leadership growth, it's different than personal development. People at that time weren't saying, they were like, well, just tell me how to be a better leader, but I don't want to talk about who I am as a person.
Mm.
COVID broke that wide open. And then my third kind of career that evolved and it kind of came together in the culmination of COVID was I went into a deep dive around mindfulness and around really understanding silence and stillness. I got multiple certifications in mindfulness, meditation, all this stuff. So I would tell you, and I'm telling you this, but I'll connect it back. I have 14 coaching certifications in those three buckets as a result of the inquiry and curiosity. And when I think about that Michelangelo statement, I don't talk about this a lot. The number of hours of certification, over 10,000 hours coaching clients, all of my continuing education falls in the top 3% of coaches in the world. And I didn't know that. The people that govern that pointed that out to me. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But I've just been doing it for so long. So I give you all that to say, I was so deep in the question that when I came up with these habits, I actually realized I was teaching in my coaching the top 10 essential skills that create these habits. These aren't habits that are out there in the leadership growth language or the personal development space. They're out in different silos, if you will. But I remember someone talking about mindfulness, and I was like, well, okay, so what is mindfulness? And a lot of people's perceptions around mindfulness was that it was this, Eastern, Buddha sitting under a tree. And if I meditate, I become more enlightened. I know a lot of jerks who meditate religiously, but they didn't change their behavior. And so my point in bringing mindfulness into these habits was I wanted to help people understand what mindfulness really is it's practicing being present in the moment and paying attention to your thoughts and emotions without judgment so you can cultivate self-awareness. And if you're doing that, then what happens is you will show up and be present with other people and pay attention to your thoughts and emotions about them without judgment. And you will be so self aware of what you're thinking about the other person. You will then choose to think thoughts of kindness, of connection, of compassion. And so we use these buzzwords, you're right, but nobody talks about what's underneath and the habit of that word that helps us to grow and evolve and be who we really are. Because back to what you said earlier, who we really are is, beings of pure light and love and awareness and expansive energy. That feeling you feel deep in your gut that I'm here to do something really great is your natural state. Mindfulness in the commercial world is going to a studio or finding a habit, and then all of a sudden you become attached to your meditation practice, but you don't drop down deep enough to really cultivate the habit of mindfulness. You're just doing mindfulness. But could you imagine having a habit where you learn to be mindfulness? Then you would be presence, and you would be without judgment, and you would be pure self-awareness. And that's that light, that feeling you feel inside yourself. Self-awareness just is. And I thought, well, why aren't we talking about these habits? And then I realized not only do these habits come as a result of the skills that I was teaching myself and others through this coaching process, then I realized if we really had these skills and we really had these habits, we would show up, and you can do all the things that I'm talking about on this handout with the habits and skills, but your doing is married to your being. And that's how I came up with them. Was it's not write down every day, because gratitude is one of my habits. That's great. But you don't just write things in a journal to check the box to say I practice gratitude today. You really create the habit of gratitude to cultivate the skill of self-love. And then when you cultivate the skill of self-love, guess what shows up as a habit? Gratitude. So there was kind of this infinity, and I talk about it more. And for your listeners, we'll talk about it at the end. You can go to the website, get the handout for free. I just felt like it just came. It came through the relentless pursuit of asking the questions of what's missing, what's not being taught in personal development and leadership growth that really takes us to, this, everyone loves this 10x, and I thought, well, the power of 10 is great, but 10 skills to the 10th power is the visual I use. Could you imagine cultivating the 10 skills that create the 10 habits? 10 to the 10th power is a really big number. That's how you really put your personal development into warp speed. So that's how I came up with them. And they're based on science. They're based on questions. They're based on major research thought leaders. But my work is an integration of, saints and sages and science from, all of time. And I really went into my own kind of Jackson Pollock mad woman, just pulling all the pieces, and then sitting in COVID, like you were in your basement. And, I was in my house sitting with thousands and thousands of pieces of data and information, and then just putting it all down and shutting up and sitting, and then asking to hear how to put it together. And this is what I heard, and this is how it was created. And I wish I could give you all the answers, but that was the process. And I allowed something to move through me. And then I followed that wisdom to connect to something to say, okay, let's try that. And then, of course, coaching clients over the years, I've seen it work over and over and over and over again to change people's lives.